Welcome in, everybody, to Sideline Fantasy. This is your host, E-Rock, and I am joined again by my co-host, Crimmy Charles. We are back here for Week 8 of the fantasy football season. We are ready to talk about what's going to shake down this week in the league. How we doing, Mr. Charles?
Pretty good. Would have been better off had I not lost to a 1-5 team last week, but it is what it is.
I don't know, how do you lose to Dave? That is bad. I mean, he is awful, and you just got straight whooped by him.
I mean, you're gonna find a win somehow, some way, I guess. I mean, this guy's performing well. Some guys overperform, so I mean, I can't really sit here and complain because that's fantasy for you.
It is fantasy for you. He puts up less than 50 against me and then 150 against you. Like, holy shiesties. You know what I'm saying? That's pretty crazy. Yeah, we got a lot to shake down this week. Division 2 again got absolutely destroyed by Division 1 last week. It was 5-1 in the first week, 4-2 last week, and yeah, it's making Division 1 all of a sudden look really, really good and tough to get a playoff spot in. But we'll talk more about the standings at the end. Let's go back to these transactions. We had a huge trade week last week, and we had a couple trades that went down this week. One of the trades was to Khalil Mockingbird, Tyler, trading with you. And oh my God, believe it or not, deja vu. It's happening again. You traded Zeke to Tyler, and you also traded Henry Ruggs, and you received DJ Shark and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in return. Now, a lot of the leagues thinking, wow, it happened again. What's your thought to them?
I mean, I feel like the timing was good for it. Last time it was just kind of because he was underperforming. It was not really a product of the team itself. But looking forward to what this team has, you don't have a starting quarterback that's seen us. I mean, he's seen some snaps, more than 15 snaps in Ben DiNucci. It's like they're going to play this week against Philadelphia. So I don't really think that's going to help Zeke Elliott. I kind of thought that once Dak went down, they would push more towards Zeke, but he's been very, very difficult to rely on. Getting 49 rushing yards week 6 against the Cardinals, 45 in week 7 against the football team, giving me less than 10 points for the first time in the season in week 6. We're doing it again. Week 7 giving me less than 6 points.
He's still running back 4, though, Crimmins. He is still running back 3, I think.
And I understand that, but that's because you have,
essentially 2 bad weeks and you're just writing them off. And let's also tell the audience, me and you were in a couple leagues together here, Crammy. Let's also tell the audience about the fact that you also traded him in another league. Just for some background knowledge, he also got rid of Zeke in the other league this week. So he's really jumping off that Zeke train and riding Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who does have Le'Veon Bell joining the action this week. What did you kind of think of that? Are you fine with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I don't think that you bring in Le'Veon Bell again, still after drafting this kid with your first round pick and have him just pushed out of the way. I know his snaps may go down, yes, but I still think that this kid is their guy. I mean, last week, even with Le'Veon, he still had 46 rushing yards. He had a touchdown, 17 receiving yards. I mean, that was against Denver, which is a game where got out of hand very quickly. So they were able to give Le'Veon more snaps, clearly. This week again against the Jets could be the same thing, but I'm content with, getting 13, 14, at least more than 8 fantasy points from a guy on a team like that than I am to take my first round pick and giving me 8 or less, because that team is in shambles, man. Like that, if you look at it from my perspective, their schedule is not great going forward. I mean, you don't have Dak for the rest of the year. You don't have Andy Dalton for this game, who, I mean, I'm sure he'll be back next game, but you're playing Philly, not a great team, but with a 7th-round quarterback under center. Who knows what to expect for that? And then next week you play Pittsburgh. I mean, that's they're no slouch either. They're 6-0. They're one of the best teams in the league right now, especially on the defensive end of things. And then you have a Week 10 bye. So, to me, the value wasn't necessarily there in regards to playing him. Week 8, Week 9, Week 10 you have a bye. Okay, so he plays Minnesota Week 11. That's a matchup that's good on paper, but who's to say that they actually do anything against them either? Then you have Week 12 against Washington, who he played Week 7, who had 5.6, and now you're in the playoffs, where you see Baltimore, Cincinnati, San Fran, Sorry, Baltimore's the last game of the year. Then you see the playoffs. So even then, like the schedule there is tough. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy to let Zeke go. I mean, it's Zeke. It's one of my favorite running backs in the league. My first overall pick for me. So it's not like I wanted to let him go, but just the cards, this weren't laying down for me properly. I had to do something in regards to letting myself set up for what's to come, as opposed to just hoping that Zeke is out of a slump, this late in the year where the playoffs are around the corner.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of those wait and see trades because DJ Shark you had last year, he was big on your roster last year, getting you to where you were. That team is going to throw the ball a lot, but he's only had a couple fantasy weeks this year where he's been viable. You hope with that offense he can kind of get going again. While Henry Ruggs, on the other hand, hasn't done a whole lot this year, has had some breakout games, but probably not someone you can rely on every week either. So Shark has a little bit more upside than Ruggs, I suppose. And we're going to see if Hilaire can keep doing what he's doing, and we'll see if that Zeke trade, comes back to haunt Krim 2 years in a row. If it does, that's going to be quite crazy, quite crazy. Tyler's made some big moves these last couple weeks to really keep his team in good positioning with Christian McCaffrey coming back. We're going to have to talk about that later when we get to his team. He's going to have McCaffrey and Zeke on the same team. But let's look at that other trade that happened. David Johnson and Deontay Johnson. So the Johnson brothers getting traded to Rob for Adam Thielen, a top 6 receiver in fantasy this year, has been fantastic to this point. I think he's scored in all but one game this year. I think he's been 12, 20, 25. I think he's had 3 20-plus performance games already. For David Johnson and Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson hasn't been great this year, but that Steelers offense is big, and he's been banged up a little bit. And David Johnson, it's hard to come by running backs, and he is running back 16 on the year. He's been double digits every week outside of one. So from a point perspective, he's been a solid running back this year, even though he's not really broken out, 100-yard game, very low yards per carry, but he's been pretty viable fantasy-wise. What did you think of this trade from both sides?
Well, first off, it's unfortunate that we don't have some sort of, post-production kind of deal here, because I would have absolutely cut out the entire Johnson Brothers thing. That was absolutely awful.
Yeah, the Johnson brothers.
No, that was awful.
They're both named Johnson.
Let's never do that again.
Johnson
but
brothers.
Getting into the actual trade itself, I don't think it was bad by any means. Yeah, Kyle gave up a running back of his. I don't think his roster necessarily didn't. I mean,
he was looking to get a big fish. He's been trying to get a big fish for a while. He wanted Henry. He wanted Zeke. He wanted a lot of these guys. And I don't want to say he settled, but he's like, I need a big fish. And if this is how I can get it done, then I'll do it. And, pair that with the trade last week. And it's interesting to kind of see how his team's taking shape.
I mean, yeah, because I wouldn't say he gave up a lot for Thielen. Thielen has been great. I mean, even after his bye week, he's wide receiver 6.
Yeah, he was 1.
Yeah, so you're coming back and playing Green Bay, Detroit, Chicago. Those are all divisional games, so they're going to, play their ass off, hopefully. Dallas, Carolina, Jacksonville. And then the playoff schedule for him isn't fantastic, we have to kind of mention these things now with these players just because, again, we're getting fairly close to that point
sure.
It becomes something to look into. Tampa Bay, Chicago, New Orleans for the playoffs. So not great matchups there, but, I mean, it's a team where their running game is efficient enough to where as long as Dalvin Cook is out there and able to kind of take away pressure, they're going to be able to kind of find Thielen no matter what. I mean, he's scored in every game except for one, so that's massive for a receiver in fantasy. The matchup this week at least is very good. Next week also very good, I would say, on paper. So just getting somebody like that who is targeted a lot and is very efficient, you can't really put a price on that necessarily. Obviously, people have one, whereas this case it was David Johnson, Deontay Johnson. There's upside there for both those guys, and David and Deontay.
Yeah, the Johnson brothers.
Let's not refer to them as such anymore. But I do like both sides for sure. I don't think anybody got the worst end of the stick. I feel like this trade was very balanced in regards to what you're getting out of it. Rob definitely needed a running back with his guys getting banged up. I mean, he didn't have Dalvin for a little bit. He just had Le'Veon, but now Le'Veon's in a backfield where he's now kind of playing second fiddle to a degree. So getting somebody like that where is their lead back, and with Houston, getting him involved quite a bit, I think that both guys got what they needed in this trade.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Again, the waiver wire the trade market keeps getting hotter and hotter each week. The trade deadline, just so you guys remember, is before any players play Week 10. Not any, but if they're involved in a trade, it has to be before their Week 10 game. So just remember that. So got about 2 weeks left on the trade market before those are no longer able to be done. So we'll see how it shakes out. Real quick, nothing too crazy on the ad market or on the transaction market for ads. Let's just take a quick look at it. Tevin Coleman was picked up by a pretty hefty number of 28 from Kyle. Gus Edwards, 14, also by Kyle. So he spent 42 on running backs this week. You got Scotty Miller at 10. The other 49er running back, Hasty, was picked up for 7. AJ Green, who, by the way, has 25 targets in the last 2 weeks. I got him for 6. Aguilar for 5. Nothing too crazy. Any quick thoughts kind of on the transaction market this week?
No, I mean, yeah, Tevin Coleman coming back. Like, it's just guys that coming back from injuries or guys kind of covering injuries. It's getting pretty bare out there unless people kind of give up on players, and we kind of hope that we can get them in spots where they rejuvenate themselves. But I don't think that anything here really surprised anybody. I mean, those guys were pretty targeted in most leagues, so there's no really surprise, even points wise spent. The biggest thing to me, I guess, would be the fact that Kyle didn't go back and get his man Rodrigo Blankenship for more than 2 points.
I know.
Because he
what the heck?
rode him until he couldn't anymore. And kind of, I don't know if he forgot about him or he just decided, he'll keep no kicker still again. But, I mean, I'm surprised that I got him for 2.
I'll tell you what, man, it's a hard knock life when you have like the number 1 or 2 kicker and they're on a bye. It's always there's part of you that goes, you know what? I kind of want to keep him. I'm just going to keep him. But then at the end of the day, you're like, man, unless it was like the Justin Tucker from a couple years ago when he was just going crazy, it's like, it's hard not to drop your kicker on a bye. But, he got rid of him and you got him for 2 points. So he did pick up their defense though. So interesting. But you did get the boy Rodrigo to Blankenship, so that was good there. But let's move on to the matchups here, Krem. Let's get to the first one. It is going to be you, or sorry, on mine it says something. Yeah, let's go to yours, right? Newcomb Jukum.
It'll always be me.
Yeah. Newcomb Jukum and my ball Zach Ertz. You got 17 on the board already from Julio Jones and their win over your Carolina Panthers on Thursday night. 137 yards. Had a really good game there for Atlanta. And you are projected to beat Kyle by 3 with that good start with the Julio performance. Carson Wentz against a really bad Dallas defense. You're going to ride the Fulgham train, try to get that going together. That's also the Sunday night game. You're going to try to ride that Swift combination, Hilaire against New York. You got some good matchups this week. Scotty Miller against the Giants. Kyle, on the other hand, is doing the empty kicker approach, but he does have some good matchups. Tyreek Hill versus New York, Devontae Adams versus Minnesota. He's got arguably the best receiving core in the league. I mean, Thielen, Adams, and Hill. And they all arguably have pretty good matchups this week. That's good stuff there as well. Chris Carson playing is obviously a big one, but San Fran's defense has been pretty good. Gio Bernard against Tennessee will get the start again. This is definitely one of the bigger matchups of the week. Kyle trying to get back to 4-4. You having lost last week at 4-3, trying not to fall to 4-4, trying to maybe get back on top of the division here. Thoughts heading into this one?
I mean, in the Thursday nights, usually I can say a lot of the time they make or break you. Thankfully, it did not break me entirely. I mean, Julio Jones had quite a game.
You're feeling good, yeah.
I'm feeling decent after that, obviously. I mean, it's the only numbers you see are Julio Jones. He's the only one who's played so far. But it just, that to me also just gets me going in regards to that trade worked out very well for me, I would say. Even Ebron's been playing decently well for the most part. So hopefully that my other trade pans out. Edwards Hilaire kind of is able to find the end zone again and kind of start a little relationship here with me. Start off to a good start with W here. But I mean, yeah, both sides have good matchups as most matchups do. But Kyle, and to a degree, is going to have to make a choice here. Chris Carson, I know he's questionable, but I just don't know if someone who was considered week to week is going to play the week after he's designated as such. I don't know if they're going to rush him back. I don't know what they're going to do because Carlos Hyde's not playing. So that could be
and Travis Homer's questionable. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so that that could come back, and he may be forced to play, an Edwards or a Dobbins, just because that's his only really viable options. He's got
Wouldn't
Tevin
be
Coleman there
awful,
also, but
especially with Mark Ingram not
yeah,
playing.
it wouldn't be bad. But I mean, it's either that you do that too. I mean, you're gonna have to take one of these guys. I don't know if his plan is to kind of secure the entire Baltimore backfield and kind of be able to ride whoever is hot and whoever Baltimore says is their starter now. But it might come down to dropping one of those guys or
Right.
dropping somebody viable
And
to get a kicker in there, and or just play one of them, and you're kind of at a loss there with Carson being out.
And, and I'll tell you what, I know we kind of with the Tyler and Kyle trade last week, we kind of gave Tyler the edge on that one, and I think that's kind of most people's synopsis from the trade. But there's also some of us that said it made sense for Kyle, and when you look at that other trade he paired this week, and when you look at what his team will look like normally when Robinson from Jacksonville is back, who by the way is running back 2 on fantasy football this year, he's been fantastic. He's going to be able to pair Chris Carson and Robinson and have a receiving core of Thielen, Adams, and Tyreek Hill. He's been saying it all season long. He wants the big fish. He wants the big fish. He has those big fish now. He's going to have 2 top 10 running backs in all of fantasy, and he's going to have probably the best receiving core of any team in fantasy in Thielen, Adams, and Diggs. And he is playing still quarterback roulette. He's got Derek Carr going this week, but all of a sudden, Kyle's team, even though a lot of people I think kind of looked at him as the loser of the trade with Tyler, has a lot of star power on it, a lot. And we'll see if they're able to keep that going. So let's go on to the next matchup here. It is, tell me what it is.
It'd be Fear the Hurricane Dave at a fantastic 2-5 now, up against Jay, who is 4-3, coming off and win himself.
And here's the thing: when you look at the standings, which we'll take a deeper look at it at the end of the show, Dave, who's mulling around, I'm done, I'm out of it, my season's done. All of a sudden, somehow, some way, is again a game out of a playoff spot. And yes, it's going to be hard with tiebreakers and him having not beat many division teams, but you still got 2 division games at the end of the year. The division keeps losing. That win against you last week was huge for him, and it kind of gave him a little bit of a pulse. He does play his good buddy Jay, who has 26 points already between Matt Ryan and Mike Davis. But if I'd have to be Dave right now, I'd have to feel pretty okay with the way the Thursday night game shook out. Gurley 10.5, not bad. I think Dave will take that. Jay is still projected to win by 6 here, but a really big game for both sides. Jay at 4-3, holding tight at a playoff spot amongst a very, very crowded 4-3 division. And Dave, all of a sudden, one of his only division teams to win last week, could win again this week and catapult himself somehow, some way, close to a playoff position. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, looking at it,
he's riding that Charger train this
he
week.
Is. Then again, it's easy to break it down in regards to the Chargers play well, Dave plays well. If the Chargers don't play well, then Dave doesn't play well. But in this regard, I mean, it's tougher. I mean, you're playing Denver. Yeah, they haven't been as great as people thought they were going to be this year. But it's still not a matchup that you just kind of sit there and say, yeah, the Chargers got this one in the bag in regards to fantasy. I think that they'll win that game for sure. But, to what degree and what these guys do, I mean, it's yet to be seen, obviously. But that right there is a big chunk of Dave's fantasy week. I mean, if Herbert plays well but doesn't find Keenan, or Herbert doesn't play well and Keenan doesn't play well at that point too, and the run game, gets.
I mean, if the Chargers get 10 points, Dave loses fantasy.
Yeah.
He loses his week, right? I mean, that's kind of the way you look at it when you're playing that many Chargers. Yeah.
They've got it. They've got to score, early and often. And the rest of his team here, I mean, Tyler Boyd has been pretty good. The matchup there is pretty solid. Gronkowski has been surprising in the last 2 weeks after kind of breaking out in a way. Landry, I think it's a good play just because there's no Beckham, so hopefully he gets most of the targets, but we'll see.
Yeah.
And just from that, I mean, it's not bad because he kind of closes out the week too with Gronk and the Eagles defense that against this 7th-round quarterback, if he makes a couple mistakes here and there, that could also boost his points that way too, very in a very valuable way. But it's tough to say. Just that one game, man. It always comes down to just the Chargers. If they play well, Dave has a shot. If they don't, he doesn't really have a chance unless Boyd and others have massive games, which we saw last week happen. And the Chargers were in a good matchup, so obviously that helped them too. But it's just there's so many eggs in one basket. It's tough for me to kind of trust that team at all.
Yeah, it'll be a cool matchup too, because Lockett against San Fran, does Richard Sherman cover him? And then Stephon Diggs against New England, does Stephon Gilmore cover him? So Jay has some good receivers, but could be going against some really tough number one corners this week. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out. But big game there. I mean, every game is big still at this point in the fantasy season.
You'd be surprised too, though, because Stephon Gilmore was actually ruled out, so
Oh
Diggs
yeah,
should
that
have
is
a
true.
good game.
That is true. That is true. Yep. Next matchup, who we got?
We've got the Brady Bunch coming off their third straight loss, and Chad coming off his fifth straight win, looking for his sixth.
He's trying to prove the doubters wrong who said his team wasn't good at the beginning of the year. He did get a 6.5 point performance from DJ Moore, and that came really late in the game. I'm sure he's thankful just to get that. While Dana got 5 points from his kicker, Joey Sly. We have Chad predicted to lose by 6 points this week, even though he's riding a 5-game winning streak sitting on top of Division One. Dana, meanwhile, having lost 3 in a row, hanging on by a thread here with Dave at 2-5 in that division. Chad's going to have to ride Boston Scott this week. Ronald Jones, who again, after we just praised him the week before, did get 10 points last week, but Leonard Fournette was getting quite a lot of touches again. So kind of a situation to watch there in Tampa. T. Higgins, he's starting against Tennessee. Allen Robinson is cleared from a concussion. Jonnu Smith, who's been pretty good this year. The other side, big star power in Galladay, Jefferson, Andrews, solid touch running backs in Gaskin and Montgomery. I think the predictions are kind of right this week. I think Chad's kind of got some tough matchups. We'll see kind of how his running back situation trickles out. But I think it's very possible, star power-wise, you look at Dana's team, and I could see why they haven't projected for a win.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they've got decent matchups for sure. And he's just got those guys who are, set to put up massive amounts of points. Meanwhile, Chad's team, well, they aren't, household names like Boston Scott and T. Higgins and such. Those guys can still give you, decent points. And he's had a guy on Thursday play, DJ Moore, who had 6.5 points, who didn't get a catch, I don't believe, until the third quarter, so it didn't really help his situation at all. Dana obviously had a player play as well with Joey Sly, who gave him 5. So when your kicker can match a receiver, essentially, it's not, it's a pretty decent start to the week. But kickers this year, and especially, I think, have been blowing teams out of the water just because they're getting, 13, 20 points, and they're outscoring receivers and running backs who are scoring touchdowns. So those things can, really add up over time. But yeah, I do see why Dana's team is projected to win this game. Chad's guys kind of, are on the lower end of things. I feel like there's still players who can play well and have great games, but the matchups there just aren't really in his favor.
And it's funny because, I mean, looking at Chad's team, and again, I mean, it's not a knock on his team, but you just don't see, like, those couple star players that you expect to see. But his team is number 1 in the league right now. But, Ronald Jones, Tannehill, who's been, surprisingly good, but who would have projected him to do as well as he has? Then you got DJ Moore. Then you have Allen Robinson. You have Joe Mixon, who's out right now. He's been out for a couple weeks. But nothing screams on his team like, oh, my God, nasty, really good team. But he's just managed to kind of win his matchup every week and find himself at 5-2, doing a pretty good job of it. So we'll see if he can keep that rolling, or if Dana can get off that 3-game losing streak and kind of get back in the thick of things in Division 2. Next matchup is
Tequila Mockingbird and Chop Squad. 2 teams looking to stay afloat to a degree. Tyler looking to stay atop that Division 2, and Trey looking to get back he's in the mix now, but even further in the mix with the win after winning 3 straight.
Yeah, both these teams are kind of trending in the right direction. Obviously, Tyler did lose last week. It was a tough one. He's kind of due for a loss, and it was a game where he just got absolutely trounced. And it was a game where Chad didn't even really put up, again, many points, but he did what he had to do to win. So Tyler's looking to bounce back, made some trades the week before, looking for it to kind of pan out this week. 13 points from his kicker is obviously a huge start for him, while Robbie Anderson only got 7 for Trey. But Tyler does have some good matchups. Mahomes against New York, Zeke against Philly, big divisional game there. He's going to have to ride that Perrine train again. We'll see if that we'll see. KC can make that very unreachable very quickly. Metcalf, CeeDee Lamb, Robert Woods, some big names there as well. While on the other side, Trey has Baker Mayfield and Kareem Hunt pairing up against Las Vegas. Jonathan Taylor against Detroit. A.J. Brown finally getting back into the swing of things. Jared Cook, Josh Jacobs again back as well. Josh Jacobs has been a little sketchy so far this year. He is still running back 14, but he's had a couple weeks where he's struggled, especially last week. But another big one here, Trey has won 3 in a row after, I didn't want to say quite dead out of water, but he was looking really shaky with the injuries and the way things were going. But he has won 3 in a row at 4-3 in a really good spot. Tyler 5-2, still one of the best teams in the league. Trey projected to win by 2 here in the upset.
Yeah, I mean, I do like something on both sides. Obviously, it's easy to kind of find that, but to sit there and look at it's just running backs for this one for me, man. I mean, if Zeke can't get it going this week, and that's your really end all be all with running backs, because P Ryan has been very, very bad. I mean, even with the he's getting more snaps. Sorry, more opportunities that way. He's just not getting yards. I mean, he's not getting receptions. He's barely running the ball well. He last week scored a touchdown, which gave him half of his points. So that obviously helped with giving him 12 points. But I mean, if you're getting a guy who's giving you 4.6, getting you 6 points, and that's not only one guy doing that, but 2, with Zeke kind of playing the way he is right now, it's very tough to combat any other sort of running back duo when you're getting a measly 12, 14, 16 points combined with those 2 guys like that. But you're going to have, Metcalf step it up. You're having CeeDee Lamb kind of, again, falling into, the void there with the quarterback play being very bad in Dallas. So it's just like you have the players from at the beginning of the year, they looked good, but just the production is just not there for those guys right now.
Yeah, definitely not. Yep. And we'll see if Tyler can kind of take a big bounce back from like his very bad performance last week. And Trey, like I said, 3 wins in a row, just keeps on rolling on through things. Looking to maybe get to 5-3 and climb not only in the division, but possibly to the top or close to it. So 13-7 right now, but we'll see how it shakes out. Next matchup.
Next matchup is the Fear Boners with Rob and Peter. Both guys, looking for a big win here, with Rob being 3-4, still kind of clawing at a playoff spot, and Peter again at 4-3. That 4-3 in the Division 1 is it's everyone's got it, I feel.
Yeah, not me. Yeah, that's the problem, not me. But yeah, Rob's lost 3 in a row. He was feeling pretty good after that 3-1 start, but he has lost 3 in a row. He's really looking to kind of get off that losing schneid this week. Devontae Freeman is ruled out, so he is going to have to make a change there. Dalvin Cook is questionable, but from likelihood will play. So we'll see what happens there. And then you got the receivers, Parker and Davis, decent combo. Deontay Johnson, okay. Big pass catcher, and Kelsey, who he put on the block this week, looking for a number 1 receiver. He does have Le'Veon Bell on his bench, looking to make his debut. While on the other side, Peter, who is 4-3, has won 2 in a row, climbed above 500, has some pretty good matchups this week as well, getting Jamal Williamson as a start, Melvin Gordon back, Cooper having to start Ayuk, but Shepard was really good not too long ago. One of the better tight ends in Waller. Big matchup this week. Rob trying to get back to 500. Peter trying to keep flying through and getting to 5-3. Again, really big swing games this week, especially with Division 2 losing a lot and Division 1 winning a lot. One bad week from either side can, again, really switch things around.
Yeah, and I mean, that is not great for Rob. I mean, I knew it was happening, but he's got to fix now. Devontae Freeman being out, he'll probably just play Le'Veon or Frank Gore, which is kind of whatever. But yeah, Rob's team has had to deal with injuries. Obviously, Le'Veon being hurt, then Dalvin missing a game or 2 here, so it's difficult to kind of combat that when you don't have on his side at least it's like a stud receiver. I think that's the thing that Rob's team is missing right now. You can kind of combat your lack of running backs with stud receivers. You have Devontae Parker and Corey Davis right now who aren't great, but that's maybe why he went out and got Deontay Johnson. I also forgot that he had David Johnson on a bye, so that kind of sucks for him. But it's just something he's lacking. If his team is going to get through that, then getting David Johnson back, having Dalvin Cook there as well, and kind of being able to run out with Kelsey and such, I feel that's why he probably wanted to move him. But it's just like the team here is not bad on paper. It's not great. It kind of reminds me of Chad's team, where it's just, it has some star names. Obviously, Russell Wilson's a stud. Dalvin Cook's a stud. Kelsey's a stud, but just those guys have been missing at times where Russell was on a bye last week. Dalvin's been out for,
And
I
he's waiting
believe,
for his team to get full back strength, and I feel like
that's
you'd
the
feel a
thing.
lot better about it. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And that's kind of what, on the other side of things with Peter, I mean, his team right now
Miles
isn't
Sanders,
either.
Aaron
He's
Jones.
no Miles
Yeah.
Sanders, no Aaron Jones. He's kind of dealing with the same thing.
He would love to come out of this week with another win, get to 5-3 without his top 2 running
You know,
backs. I
you
mean, that would
get
be
those
great.
you get those guys back. You're able to then just play Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders. You're playing Melvin Gordon, playing your flex at that point too. There's just guys on his team where I would say that you have to look into. I wouldn't say adding necessarily trading guys away, but just adding another piece. I mean, Terry McLaurin has been good as a receiver. Amari Cooper. I mean, even though Ben DiNucci last time he played did look Amari's way, and Amari somehow, some way, even with the injury to Dak, has survived very well with the play of Andy Dalton and having to use Ben DiNucci just because that those games are getting out of hand quickly and they're throwing the ball a lot. So, I mean, you're still sitting here getting 17 points. You're getting 12 points, not scoring in a game where you could add 18 if you did. I mean, he's still going to have value. So getting back at Terry McLaurin from bye, having Brandon Ayuk, I mean, this team to me is somehow, some way, you look at it, you kind of brush it off a bit, but it's got some depth. I mean, it's got some guys, kind of picking up their play. Again, Ayuk is someone who's to me is surprising. I mean, he's on a team where they run the ball quite a bit. He is more like Deebo Samuel, but Deebo can't stay healthy. So what are they going to turn to? A guy who can do the same thing as Deebo,
Yeah, they need
who's
someone to catch
younger,
the ball.
and then just have someone to catch the ball. I mean, he's gonna just mesh well with Kittle, and just be able to kind of be that 1-2 punch with him. Run the ball a little bit too. He gives you kind of a little bit of everything. So he's got a lot of depth. I do feel like Peter. I mean, a lot of our teams on our end are kind of slated for a playoff run just because everyone's kind of jumbled there. But it's a bigger loss to Rob, I feel, if he loses this game this week than it is to Peter.
Yeah, agreed. Because if Peter, with the running backs he has out, can come out with a win, I think he's feeling very fortunate with that. Rob, on the other hand, is really looking to stop this losing streak and get back on the winning side of things. So both teams obviously want to win, but I see what you mean where Peter could withstand a loss here, especially with who's out on his team. Let's move on to that last matchup of the week. It is back to back and back again, myself versus Justin. We are both 3-4 on the season. Justin has lost 2 in a row. I lost 1 after starting the year off 0-3. Justin has 5.7 points from Calvin Ridley, and that was huge. He went out with injury, and I honestly, looking at these teams, there's a couple big games. He's got Rodgers and Scantling paired up, and he's got Fournette and Evans on the same team paired up going against the Giants. Those are 2 huge games, and with Ridley already getting 5, I feel like I'm off to a pretty good start here, and those 2 games right there can decide it. For sure with those kind of pairings. On my side, Lamar Jackson against a good Pittsburgh defense. Derrick Henry, I hope, can eat up pretty good against Cincinnati. Darrell Henderson, the same against Miami. My receivers are a little bit thin, again, with Michael Thomas being out, hoping to survive this week. But every single one of my players plays at noon tomorrow. So I will know what I have and what I got right after those noon games while he has that Tampa Bay game Monday night. So I think I'm looking pretty good here. You never know in fantasy what kind of crazy stuff can happen, but where my division is, with everybody being 4-3 but me, it's definitely not a must win. But I feel like I really need to win here to stay afloat because our division just can't lose.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if again a big loss on our side of things changes a lot. It changes on both sides quite a bit. Any loss in this cross division play. But to me, looking at your team looks like it's slated to probably be favored for sure, and the projections do say that by a whopping 10 points. Justin's team just doesn't look great right now, and I don't see things kind of where they can get any better. I mean, yeah, you have Kamara. He's excuse me, he's playing well. He's RB1 by far. I mean, this guy's doing everything for you, so that's kind of what's keeping your team going. But I mean, having to play Leonard Fournette, week in and week out. Yes, he's
I think that's a big one.
He's gotten into a role now, to where he's playing. But can you, as somebody you drafted highly as the Jacksonville lead guy, is it somebody that you would trust every week?
Right, and he's had a couple weeks now where he's Justin's put up some low points after starting off the season as well as he did, and I think Leonard Fournette really is. Does he get 12 to 15 touches on Sunday or on Monday night, or does he get 4 or 5 like he sometimes can? That's going to be a real big difference maker against a pretty bad Giants team that they should score a lot on. I just hope it's not Evans or Fournette.
Yeah, I mean at that point too, I'm hoping it's a lot of Scotty Miller, to be honest, because that's obviously who I have on my roster. But it's just crazy to me that someone like Fournette can go 2 games, 3 games not playing, or 2 games with not logging a single snap, 1 game getting 1 snap, and now suddenly in a game that they were winning handily, yes, he's going to get involved. And now is that going to be the norm where these games that they're up in, they're not going to be running Rojo as much and kind of keeping him fresh for games that they're more competitive and having to run the ball more? Or
Right.
are they going to then, motion in Fournette to kind of
If I
spell it?
one thing real quick, if I can't do the brothers, the Robinson brothers, you can't be doing the Rojo thing.
Rojo is a nickname given to him by other people.
I don't know.
Not by
I
me.
just don't know if I can do that one.
You
The
can-
Rojo thing.
Rojo is a thing. The whatever brothers, they have the same name, is not a thing that people call them constantly. So there's that.
All right.
Anyways, back to the analysis. It's going to be tough for Justin just because they have again the projections there. 10-point projections to lose
That's
by.
pretty big.
And you have a player who's already gone. That's not great. I mean, you have a guy who they've now taken into consideration, has played. He was projected to get higher. He did not, obviously. So a whole 10 points, 9 point whatever, to be exact. But
all it takes is 150-yard, 2 touchdown game from Scantling, and boom,
that's the thing. I mean, the flex position there, it can be massive for you. It's a good matchup, yes. So MVS can kind of get it going if he were to, produce like he was week 1 where he had 17. But outside of that, he's had less than, 7 points in all games but 1. I mean, it's not like he's getting looked at. Devontae Adams is the guy here. He played him last week, and he got a 0.9 performance out of him. So I don't know if he goes back to him again. Maybe he tries the AP train. Maybe he just decides to go to Hardman. Who knows? I mean, it's just difficult for him to kind of have to fight through this. It's not like he has the options on the bench either. There's really no injuries that are keeping him out of it. There's nobody he, is missing in action. Like the team is full strength. Now that he is really questionable for next week. I don't know the extent of his injury there, but that could actually, if Ridley misses any sort of time, that could crush his team just because the depth is not there on the bench. The guys in the in the waiver wire, they can fill in for sure, depending on the matchup, but you're not going to get what Ridley would give you. And I think that Ridley and Kamara were really the backbone of this team. Evans had a couple weeks where he kind of led the charge, getting 2 touchdowns and a total of 6 yards or whatever he was doing. But he's kind of fallen off the face of the earth the last 2 weeks, getting you a total of under 7 in 2 weeks of play. I mean, that's somebody you draft thinking, okay, he's going to have a good time with Brady. Brady would target him a decent amount. He's like a Gronk in a way. He's got a big frame. He can get you, down the field. It's something Brady would like, but just I don't know why it's not working. I don't know what the issue is there, but I mean, at the same time, you're relying on that and relying on Fournette, who is also very unstable in regards to his role there. It's going to be a very tough time to win any game here, let alone this one this week.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it'll be, again, standings are an interesting one. We're going to take a look at them now. We got Chad Fellers at 5-2, winner of 5 in a row. Interesting thing, though, and this is what's the fun about fantasy, is he is the 4th highest scoring team in the league, darn near the 5th highest scoring team in the division. And he is number 1. Trey, who is 5th in the division at 4-3, is only 6 points behind him. And it's kind of crazy to see, but that's kind of, again, that's the fun of it. Winner of 5 in a row. Everyone else, Jay, Peter, Krim, Trey, are all 4-3, and then I am 3-4, rounding out the division there. Everything's so very, very tight. Very, very close between everybody. Again, every week is going to continue to shift it. And at this point, with 6 weeks left, we're a little bit past the halfway point. There's zero separation. There really is. There's zero separation at all. The number 1 seed could still be up for grabs by me. I mean, it's just everything is just so close, and it'll be fun to kind of see where that goes. On the other end, Tyler lost last week, and no, the matchup wasn't close, but if he would have won last week, that would have meant Chad was 4-3 along with everybody else, and Tyler in Division 2 would have had a 3-game lead with 6 to go. I would consider that to be pretty significant, Krim. But as it stands, he has a 2-game lead in the division. Everyone else is below 500. Rob 3-4, Justin 3-4, barely hanging on to a playoff spot. Kyle coming in hot at 3-4 as well. Dave winning last week in a stunner at 2-5, and Dana rounding out the division at 2-5. Thoughts on the divisions?
No, I mean we've obviously seen the last 2 weeks where these divisions kind of are going. I mean that can change obviously this week very drastically, but everyone in our division, Division 1, is kind of staying afloat and having to deal with being within a game of each other. I mean it's within a game from you and Trey at the 5 spot, for the game of 5, 4, 3, and 2 within that 1 spot. So it's going to be very difficult to kind of set a gap for yourself unless you kind of come out these next 3 weeks and win and have some guys drop off the face of the earth. It's going to be very tight going into that last 2-week stretch where you play those divisional games once again. So whoever you play in that point in time could actually make or break your year. I know years have been made or broken in the middle of the points here too, but those 2 games, as big as the first 5 were, and obviously these are the last 2 games of the year and they're always going to be massive, but those things can be much bigger than we think, just because those could be your season. Those could be, the reason you're the 4th team in the division, the 3rd team in the division, the 1st team in the division, all because of not even record-wise. You could tie and have those, go 1-1 against those guys, and if you don't put up the points, say you're sitting here winning games, you get 80 points. That's not going to help you either, because it's head-to-head. And I believe it's points, right? So like your point total, which we looked at just briefly there, is something that is in play in regards to whether you make the playoffs or not. So some of these teams, like Dave, he's 2-5. He's a game out of making the playoffs, but he has to hope now that the teams ahead of him aren't those guys who beat him, which are likely going to be, because again he won 1 game.
He's basically got to have a better record than them.
He's
yeah,
a
lot of ties aren't going to work for him.
No, so like those things there, like. A lot of things come into play, and the water gets murky at that point. But I mean, we're kind of seeing that even though Tyler's the only guy who's somewhat safe, everybody else, has a chance for sure. And I believe last year we didn't have that.
You'd have to think with 6 games to go left in that division, 7-6 gets you in, because the 2 and the 3 team right now are 3-4. That would mean them going 4-2 the rest of the way. That's a pretty good stretch of fantasy record right there. 7-6 probably gets you in. I would say 8-5, maybe 9-4 at the very most at this point. I mean, that's the highest Rob and Justin and some of these guys can go is 9-4. So Tyler with 8 wins could wrap up the division easily.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. If you look at it that way, within the next 3 weeks, Tyler can wrap up the division. Obviously, you're not sitting there not playing your guys. It's not real football like that. But to know that, I mean, the big thing too with Tyler last week is if he were to win and have a 3-game lead coming into this week, if you win and your division loses again, if you went into the last 5 weeks
with a 3-game
lead, 4-game lead at that point,
3-game lead, yeah,
that to me it changes the landscape of your division, obviously, but also changes your opportunities of trading for players, because you can sit there knowing I'm in the playoffs with 1 more win.
Yeah. Not only 1 more win, but a bye. I mean, bye week.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can give up some players that you think you would need to get yourself into that position now, and just ride it out. You're probably making the playoffs at that point. Do you want to go get another star player by giving up some depth and a solid player that you can kind of use now in the playoffs? Because when the playoffs come, you don't want to make decisions where, I have to play so-and-so or so-and-so. I'm going to have these guys locked in. Let's see what they do. So that could change a lot of things now too. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, everything very tight in both divisions. Like I said, 5-2 at the top with Chad, 5-2 at the top with Tyler. Neither of them are the highest scoring teams in their division either. Rob, actually, despite the way his team's been turning, 3 straight losses, and what we've been saying about it, is still the highest scoring team in the league with 840 points. So another week in the books, guys. Week 8 coming at you tomorrow. We're excited to kind of see what happens, to see what's going to happen in these standings, and every week's kind of a fun new kind of story to unfold. So thanks for tuning in to our Sideline Week 8 fantasy preview show. Hopefully you have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.